Hello, everyone. My name is Feliz. I'm the Executive Director of One Nation, Every Vote, or OneV. We're a nonpartisan organization that shares the experiences and stories of American voters and communities that honor their roles as voting citizens. OneV also shares facts and information about past and upcoming elections with the hope that all Americans exercise their right to vote in local, state, and federal elections. As many of you know, in 2022, OneV is committed to providing vital information on state level races, which often don't get enough attention. Most of the political stories that you hear are often about federal races, the midterms, and the presidential elections. However, state level public officials hold an enormous amount of power around specific issues that affect ordinary Americans, and they also have power over the implications on the fairness of elections, including presidential contests. I'm very delighted to be joined today by, Georgia native and civil rights attorney, Saira Draper, who is running for Georgia's General Assembly House District 90. We're excited to have this conversation with Saira for a number of reasons. First of all, she has an incredible story on working on voting rights in the critical state of Georgia. As you all know, OneV was created to tell these types of stories. And number two, because this year, as I mentioned, we're trying to shed light on the importance of state level races. And this gives us a great opportunity to learn about what's at stake for our country at this level. Without further ado, welcome, Saira.
Thank you, Alan. I'm so happy to be here. And thank you so much for your work and bringing attention to these issues.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Saira, let's get started with a bit about your personal story and how you got to this point of running for public office.
Sure. So yes, running for public office wasn't necessarily always in the cards, but I have dabbled in it. When I was in college, I interned with the state legislature, and that was my first kind of introduction to how the sausage was made. And it was just absolutely fascinating to me that these were just regular, everyday Georgians who were making these huge decisions that impacted everyone across the state. But, you know, I went on and had a career as an attorney, a litigator, and then also as a civil rights attorney doing impact litigation at the Southern Poverty Law Center. But the real reason that I ran for office was because really was Stacey Abrams. So Stacey Abrams was running for governor in 2018. And at that point I was transitioning from one job to the next. And I told my new employer to give me 2 months that I was going to intern or I was going to volunteer full time for Stacey's campaign. And so I ended up, you know, I was a lawyer and they said, okay, well, you should do voter protection work. And I hadn't heard of voter protection work. I didn't know what it is, but I said, sure, put me wherever. And ended up spending 2 months doing voter protection work. And I was just floored by how difficult it is to vote in Georgia. You know, I have been a voter in Georgia, and I hadn't personally experienced a lot of those issues. But when I saw the volume of people that were experiencing those issues and the different ways in which issues manifest and challenges manifest in Georgia, you know, it was just, it was a crisis. It was a crisis to me. And so, you know, in 2019, I was asked to come back to the Democratic Party of Georgia and lead their voter protection program. I was in that job for the last 3 years on the front lines of our battle for voting rights here in Georgia. And I just saw the need for legislators who understand this stuff backwards and forwards. Georgia Democrats won in 2020 in Georgia. And it was 1 step forward, 2 steps back, because then the Republican legislature, majority Republican legislature, passed one of the most oppressive and suppressive voting laws in the country, making it more hard to vote in Georgia, harder to vote in Georgia. So for me, a little bit of a long-winded story there, but you know, it's always been an interest. But the time was now, because I saw that our voting rights were very much under attack. And I had a skill set and knowledge base that I thought was absolutely critical to bring to the legislature.
Wonderful. Well, Saira, it's clear why you became so passionate about voting rights and why voting rights are so important. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're hoping to do about this particular issue in this next phase of your career? Should you win your election, how do you feel like you can make an impact in making elections more fair?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, so much of what happens with elections, and it's in the nitty gritty of these laws. It's in the administration, the everyday kind of like, how do you administer an election? What kind of time periods do you have to do X, Y, Z function? So someone could be writing these laws and they look facially, they're like, okay, yeah, sure, 3 days for this, 5 days for this. It looks fine on paper, but unless you know how the process works and are really familiar with the processes, you may not know that, oh, actually, that is really detrimental to the process. I'll give you a really brief example. They moved, with this new law, they moved the runoff period from 9 weeks after the general election to 4 weeks after the general election. And when the Senate runoff happened in Georgia in 2021, when Ossoff and Warnock won their Senate seats, that was an election that happened 9 weeks after the general election. And that 9 weeks allowed county election offices to first handle the general election and certify that election and deal with everything that was coming out of that election. And it was a lot here in Georgia. And also prepare for the next election, right? So set up that early voting, set up multiple locations for early voting, start processing those absentee ballots. So that 9 weeks gave them the opportunity to do both. Now that that period has been reduced to 4 weeks, it is really hard to offer a lot of early voting days for that runoff election. It's also really hard to give people the time they need to vote absentee if they need to. So those kinds of changes that may look neutral on paper really aren't neutral at all. And that expertise that I bring to be able to really just identify those issues is something that, I think will be a natural fit for me if I'm so lucky to get to the legislature.
Well, Saira, if you are so lucky to get to the legislature, I'm sure voting rights is not the only thing that will be on your plate. There are a variety of other issues that you'll have to work on. Looking specifically at House District 90, can you tell us a bit about that district and the main issues impacting citizens in that district that you're hoping to work on?
Yes, so District 90 is an amazing district. We are in DeKalb County. Part of our district includes the city of Atlanta. The other half of our district includes unincorporated DeKalb County. There's 60,000 people in this district. It is a diverse district. It's also a district of extremes. I mean, we have some of the most affluent neighborhoods, and we have neighborhoods that aren't affluent at all. So the issues that come up are very diverse, and that's a challenge for anybody that represents this district. And by the way, this is the former district of Stacey Abrams herself, who's of course running for governor in Georgia, and B. Wynn currently sits in the seat, and she's running for Secretary of State in Georgia. So we have two women of color who have, just really led the charge on voting rights, who have come from this district. But again, the issues that affect people in District 90 are the same issues that are affecting people across the state. By and large, it's the economy, it's healthcare, it's a woman's right to choose. People in this district feel very passionately that a woman ought to have the right to choose. And of course, that's an issue that comes down to the state legislature. Here in Georgia, we have a abortion bill that was passed in 2019 that is expected to go into effect really any day now. That will limit the time a woman has the right to have an abortion. It has to be before 6 weeks. So yes, so all of those issues are issues that affect folks across the district. But the voting rights issue in particular, yes, there's a lot of passion for that because people understand how that is the foundational issue. If people can't vote for people that represent their values, then the rest kind of goes by the wayside, and people get that here.
Gotcha. Thank you, Saira. Saira, we talked about this at the top of the hour before we started this interview about the fact that unfortunately, folks just don't take enough interest in state level elections. Most of the news that they consume, political news, it's about federal races, the US Senate, the House, 2024 election, people are already talking about that. How do you convince your constituents, how do you convince the folks living in your district that they should take greater interest in state level elections? I know we've alluded to that a bit in this interview so far, but can you just articulate that a little bit? How do you go about trying to convince people that these are really important races?
So I do think it's fundamentally about education, which is why I'm so excited about organizations like yours that emphasize the education aspect. I mean, once people understand what their county commissioners do, what their city council people do, what their state legislators do, they are in the position to ask for help with those things when they need that help. Our district, when I was running in the primary, we knocked thousands and thousands of doors and had, one-on-one conversations with voters. And, so often, people would say, well, I have an issue with a pothole or something that really isn't within the jurisdiction or the purview of the legislature, right? And I think, as a elected official, your responsibility will be not saying that that's not my issue, go somewhere else, but rather, educating and leading that person to resources, whether it's an office or an individual, so that they can get the help they need. So, laying out, who does what and where you can get help with which issue is fundamental. And when people can actually understand that bureaucratic process and get themselves through it, they'll start understanding or understand even more the importance of these local positions.
Yeah, no, it's excellent answer. Thank you for that, Saira. I think that education, we need to promote that more and more these days. Saira, a couple more questions and then we can wrap up. And trying to close the loop a little bit. This was something that I was hoping we could get into at the beginning of the interview, but I'm going to come back to it. And that's a little bit about how you became inspired to be so civically minded. Is it because of school, your teachers? Was it your parents, your upbringing? Can you tell us a little bit about what sort of led to you becoming so interested in civic affairs?
Yeah, I've done a lot of introspection about that question, as I've thought about why I'm running for office and just started on this journey. And, what I've come to is I've always felt that way throughout my entire life. I'm an immigrant. My mom's from Spain, my dad's from Pakistan. And when we moved to this country, it was to build a better life for ourselves. And, with hard work and a lot of luck, we were able to do that. And, I'm in a very different place today than my parents were, when they were my age, et cetera, et cetera. And I just feel so lucky for that. And, I don't know, there's just a part of me that wants to give back. There is also this acknowledgement, this recognition that my story is not everybody's story. And there are so many people who are deserving and who are, want the same thing for themselves and for their families, and they're not doing anything wrong, but the opportunities aren't coming. So I just think that everybody ought to have the opportunity to fulfill their full potential. And that is not the current system that we have here in Georgia. And because I feel lucky, I want to be able to build that for everyone.
That's amazing, Saira. And having read about your background, I was eager for you to share that with our followers because you're right. It should be the story of all Americans. This story of opportunity, this story of success. And unfortunately, many don't enjoy the same opportunities that we've enjoyed. But looking at your story specifically just reminds me that behind every great American who's trying to make a difference and paying it forward, behind that there's a great quintessential American story. So really appreciate that. Saira, final question: how can we learn more about you and your candidacy?
Yeah, so my website, www.votesaira.com. You can find out more about me, find out more about the campaign. I do have, an opponent in November, so we're still campaigning for the next 4 months. And contact information is there, but plenty of information there.
Great. Well, Saira, we know you have a very busy schedule ahead of you. We want to wish you the best. Look forward to seeing how things unfold throughout the campaign season. On behalf of OneV, thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing your story and your passion for voting rights. Again, best of luck. As you heard, folks, if you want to learn more about Saira and her campaign, please visit her website, votesaira.com. Thank you, Saira.
Thank you.